Hey there guys, today we're taking a look at Star Wars Battlefront 2 running on the AMD Ryzen 5500U. Now we've taken a look at this game before, but that was running with 16 gigabytes of RAM. This time around we're taking a look at it with 8. Now this game runs on the Frostbite engine, so it is a pretty demanding game. And we are running it currently right now with the lowest in-game graphics settings, and we are at the stock 15 watt TDP. Now, the level of performance that we're getting right now is not exactly the greatest, though it is surprisingly good considering how well the game actually looks right now. The Frostbite engine, while being a pretty demanding engine, does look extremely nice, and it isn't as demanding as other engines that we've seen. I mean, in a lot of ways, we are getting better 1% lows than Starbound was getting at the stock 15 watt TDP. And this is what I mean when I was talking about with Starbound, how that was such a demanding game for being just 2D. Meanwhile, this game is not only just a 3D rendered game, it is one of the best looking ones, and the level of performance that we're getting here is at least around the same ballpark in terms of the averages that we got in Starbound, and our 1% lows are actually better. And if you pay attention to the frame times, they are actually pretty consistent. So while it's not an incredible experience, it is far more playable than I thought it would actually end up being. Especially considering that we are RAM limited here. I mean, we are pretty much utilizing all of the system RAM right now, and it wasn't a perfect experience. There were these moments where everything would just freeze up, but it wasn't the game locking up. It was almost like the rendering would just end up lagging, because you'll see that the overlay for MSI Afterburner was still running perfectly fine. So it wasn't like the game was crashing or anything like that. It just seemed like the rendering itself was just lagging behind, and it would just freeze up for a moment and then it would just recover. So I mean, it's not a perfect experience by any means, and realistically for the long-term use of actually gaming, it's not going to be great. But in a lot of scenarios, the 1% lows were for the most part decent enough, though once those moments of freezing happened, they did completely crater from here. But we can of course raise the TDP up to 25 watts and see if that can actually salvage the gaming experience at the full 1080p resolution. And as you can see, at the 25 watt TDP, we pretty much end up in the scenario where it's mostly just an improvement in the 1% lows, though a very slight one. Our averages are almost identical to where they were at the 15 watt TDP. It's just that those moments where there would be major dips kind of just get eliminated for the most part. I did still have those moments where it would just completely freeze up, though again, it's not the same level of freezing where the game is about to crash or anything. It just seems to be some render lag, because the overlay would still continue to just play out perfectly fine. And every time you're getting one of those lags where the game might potentially just die on you, it just completely freezes everything. The overlay would also just freeze in any other game. So this was just a very weird scenario for the most part. We're definitely in around the same level of playability for the most part as the 15 watt TDP, though in the long term of actually playing multiple games, it pretty much ended up just having far less moments of just lagging up completely on us. So it did make it a more playable experience, though the overall numbers that we're getting aren't exactly the greatest. And of course, we're not on the same map. The way that the co-op and everything works in this game is it kind of just randomly throws you on different maps. There is no real selecting where you want to play, so I kind of just kept it to maps that are as open as possible. I did play multiple rounds at each setting just to make sure that everything was running perfectly fine and things were actually consistent. There was no anomalies when it came to map selection. And what I found that for the most part, even if it's a interior map or a really wide open map, the level of performance that you get is roughly around the same. It would just be a couple FPS difference at most. And after playing multiple games, what I really ended up finding was that 1080p is just too demanding to really get a consistent overall experience. Certainly, I feel like someone out there will find this more than playable, but when you can just drop the resolution and pretty much raise your FPS, I just really don't see a reason to play like this. Of course, when we switch over to 720p, the level of performance that we're getting is far better now. Our 1% lows are well within a range where things will be more than comfortable, and while our averages aren't hitting 60, it's close enough that I think a lot of people would be perfectly fine, especially since in some European countries this is pretty much the equivalent of 60 FPS, so you're pretty much hitting the refresh rate of a standard TV in many European countries. So it does become actually far more playable, and it just makes me laugh that at this point we're running this better than Starbound ever ran. And really, considering that we're also still at the stock 15 watt TDP here, this is actually really great levels of performance. We're getting very good temperatures. I mean, look at the temperatures right now. We're not even hitting 60 yet, and I believe this is the second game that I actually ended up playing, so this was already about 45 minutes to almost maybe even an hour into playing. So the level of performance that we were getting here was pretty decent, and the temperatures were more than adequate. I love when there aren't games that actually play really well at the stock 15 watt TDP, mostly because, you know, there's a lot of people that just don't have systems that let you raise the TDP, or even if they do let you raise it, it puts it into dangerous temperatures. So being able to just game at the stock 15 watt TDP actually gets you really nice levels of performance, and you don't need to worry about temperatures at all. Of course, if you are on a system that lets you raise the TDP, you can do that, and it could potentially boost your level of performance, and we could take a look at that right now. Now, the 25 watt TDP at 720p does actually boost our averages slightly, though not dramatically so. It's pretty much just a few FPS more when it comes to the 1% lows and the averages, but they're all well within a range where it would be pretty difficult for you to realistically notice while actually playing the game. You're pretty much just raising the TDP and increasing your temperatures for what is essentially an increase of a couple of FPS. And a lot of the times it really just comes down to a margin of error, so I would actually consider maybe not even raising the TDP. Now, overall, in the long term, the 25 watt TDP was just consistently smoother. It just eliminates moments where there would be potentially any stutter, but not substantially so that I would say that it's just super necessary. And it really just comes down to how much thermal headroom you have here. Certainly right now, it really didn't get to any temperatures that I thought were dangerous or just out of a range that I think was just overall bad for the system health, though the system was making more noise than before. So if that's something that would annoy you, again, 15 watt TDP was more than adequate for playing this game. But of course, I do have the thermal headroom for it, since even after playing at the 25 watt TDP, we're still just in the low 70s. But overall, both 15 watts and 25 watts are more than playable on here, and honestly, I was pretty impressed with the results. And I'm glad to see that the 8GB of RAM is not a limiting factor here, and it doesn't push it to be unplayable by any means. So I would definitely recommend checking out the game if you're interested in playing a game like this. I personally never really play the multiplayer on here. The co-op is what I ended up doing, and I would suspect that most players that are still playing this are doing the co-op, though I do know that there is a pretty competitive scene when it comes to the hero multiplayer. But since I never play that, I really can't tell you what that's like at all. But anyways, I hope you found this video interesting or entertaining or useful. If you did, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.